Great. So yeah, following on from what Lisa's just covered with various bits on tagging and cost management, we then move on to the compliance side and ensuring that data is stored in the right places for obviously data compliance reasons, or for latency if you just want to keep it all within the same region. So first we've got Azure Blueprints, it's a configuration policy which can be set within your subscription and on your management groups, which will allow you to basically enforce certain things that your employees or your dev teams can and can't deploy. And it's great for if you're spinning up a new environment, you can just apply the blueprint as it says, and it means that the environment is ready to run out of the box. Tying into Azure Blueprints, you've got Azure Policy. So I think we've touched on this on some of the other sessions, and it also links into the tagging as well. So we've got some customers that have some backup policies in place, and they're using immutable backup. So what they were wanting to do was when they deploy certain VMs, when they're doing DR testing, they don't want those to be enrolled into their backup plans. So we created a tag which basically exempts the virtual machines from being enrolled into the recovery service vault. You can also use Azure Policy for doing update maintenance or for checking when the last time virtual machines were rebooted. And as Matt said, you can then tie that into action groups to then send you an alert to say, hey, these virtual machines have been up for over a month. They've got pending updates. You need to reboot them, and then you can tie that into an automation account to then trigger the reboot and ensure that those updates are installed. Then we've got resource locks. These are really useful, but they can be quite tricky as well. They're great because it means that you can basically stop people from accidentally deleting either resources or resource groups. However, we have seen some instances recently where I had a customer who had a resource lock on a resource group with some virtual machines, and for some reason it then started playing issues with their backups. So they had a lot of recovery checkpoints for a couple of virtual machines that would no longer remove. So we had to log a ticket with Microsoft to be like, hey, we've got this, and it seems to only be affecting some of them and not all of them. And they said it was something to do in the back end with how the resource locks had been applied. So they are great for manageability and ensuring that your resources aren't deleted accidentally. But yeah, it's always worth to just double check before you deploy them. And then finally, this is a new one for me, which I wasn't covered in the exam, but this is the Service Trust Portal, which is it's more for your customers rather than you as an engineer. If you're wanting to find out about the compliancy and all the GDPR and ISO regulations, you can send this to your customers if they want to know about all the data compliancy bits and pieces of the Microsoft Cloud. So have we got any questions for that section?
I don't think there's anything. Carl's got a question on policy.
Carl's got a question. Yeah.
Go for it, Carl.
The suspense is killing me.
Okay, so while Carl is typing,
we'll let you type. So,
do you want to go back and just with resource locks?
Yeah.
You in the slide you mentioned that there's two types of locks: read only and delete.
Yeah.
Are there scenarios where you'd use one over the other?
Yes. So, as one of the scenarios would be if you have certain users that you only want them to have read-only access to a resource group, you could tie it into a policy to say that people within this security group can only look at the resources within this resource group, but not make any changes to it.
Okay, and so how is a read-only lock different from the reader permission?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. Have you got the answer to that question, Matt?
So a read-only lock will override the permission, as in if the user's got contributor rights on the resource group, but there's a read-only lock in place, they still only have read access to that resource group. So it's a way of ensuring that certain resources within your subscription are protected from everybody, from accidental change. So not just the people that you don't want to have change permissions on the resources, but kind of everybody. So your owners, your contributors would have to break the read-only lock before they could change anything. Delete lock, as the name suggests, just protects them from deleting resources.
Yeah.
What about can I ask about policies? Simon, have you got any examples of what you might use Azure Policy for?
Yeah, so we use it for automating backups for a couple of customers. So we have a customer where they want any virtual machine that's deployed into their environment to be automatically enrolled into a recovery service vault that works really, really well. There's a couple of like standard policies that you can deploy direct from Microsoft to do this. And it uses a managed identity in the background to enroll it into the recovery service vault.
So what that's doing under the covers is if I deploy a VM without that policy kicks in and puts that in, even if I've forgotten to do it in the portal.
Yeah.
Right, that's cool. Okay.
Also, sort of on top of those kind of policies, are there any other types of policies that we deploy? Kind of as part of a landing zone that could be used.
You can do it for all sorts. So we have some which will basically flag to say if there's more than one administrator within an environment, or if you've got users within your Azure subscription which haven't got MFA enabled. We've also got some policies which we've got configured for, as I've already said, for looking at update management and ensuring that machines are patched. You can also do it for run vulnerability, or you can also use it to limit certain resources being deployed. So as we've already touched on in the beginning of the session, if you don't run up a huge Azure bill, you can limit what resources are allowed to be deployed into either a resource group or into a subscription. So yeah, they're really, really powerful. And if you get stuck, you can always ask Microsoft for help. So we had a policy that we had a customer write that kind of worked, but didn't exactly. So we just opened a ticket with Microsoft and went, hey, we've got this. This is where we've got to. This is what the end goal is. Can you give us a hand? And they basically rewrote the policy and gave it straight back to us and said, yeah, this is the changes we've made and this will do exactly what you want.
Okay, cool.
Cool. So to Carl's question then.
So basically, if he's got some resources in resource group A, those get tagged by Azure Policy. But if he moves those resources from resource group A and moves them into resource group B, he wants to remove the tags that are associated with group A and now add the tags that are associated with resource group B.
So
what's the best way to do that? I think that's what he's asking for.
I would assume you would then only apply the tags to the resource group rather than doing it to the resource. But then obviously if you want, so the tags, it would have to be a manual change, I think, unless you know any different, Matt, because even if you tag the resource, say, to be backed up and you moved it to a different resource group, it would still stay, right?
Potentially, yeah. I think the only way that you could get around that would be the issue that Lisa had, where she tried to add a tag that already existed. So rather than like the value changes, but the label stays the same, might work. But I think this is getting quite in depth into tagging.
Yes.
Over and above what other people would need for AZ-900. It's an interesting question though, Carl. It has to be said. I think we could potentially take it offline and dive into it a little bit deeper, but I think for
yeah,
this session,
reach out to us on Twitter
it's
and
a little bit more
in
technical
depth.
than that's needed.
So I cheated and ChatGPT'd it while you guys were talking. Yeah. So it says here, I'm just going to cheat. Right, it says, yes, you would have the tagging at the resource groups, and it says to remove previous tags values and replace them with new tags. You can modify the policy definition to specify the new sets of tags. Okay, that's fair enough. You can also configure the policy to perform remediation actions, such as automatically adding or removing tags from resources that are not compliant with the policy. This ensures that all resources within the resource group are always tagged correctly. So it is possible, but it's a little bit tricky, but you can do it. Yeah, but it's a very good question, and I'm pretty sure people have run into that where it's probably not worked the way they thought it would. Yeah. Cool. No, good question.
Yeah.